So
yeah.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Swansea University Annual Digital Forensics and Cybersecurity Symposium. For those who don't know me already, my name is Reza, and I'm a senior lecturer in cyber threats here at Swansea University. I'm also a member of Cyber Threats Research Center. We call it CyTREC. Here at CyTREC, we've organized this symposium, which is held every Tuesday over a 10-week period. This symposium is a series of interdisciplinary research seminars that focus on the presentations of new advances and research in the fields of digital forensics and cybersecurity. So these seminars are delivered by the leading experts in the stated fields from both industry and academia, who very kindly agree to present in these seminars. So each seminar lasts around 1 hour, including a 20 to 30-minute presentation, which is then followed by a 30 to 40-minute Q&A session. All the seminars are recorded, so if you prefer not to be recorded, please leave your cameras off. And of course, these recordings will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Our guest speaker for this week is Hamid, who's very kindly given up his time to be with us today. I've had the privilege of knowing and working closely with Hamid for over 7 years now. Hamid and I have published a number of books and research papers together, and I am a program steering committee member for Hamid's well-known annual conference, which is called International Conference on Global Security, Safety, and Sustainability. Hamid, on behalf of the CyTREC, I would like to welcome you to Swansea University, and we look forward to your presentation. So without further ado, I pass the session to you.
Thank you ever so much. It's really a pleasure working with you guys, and I already know some of the colleagues in the center, and I know the good work that you guys carrying on. So just a very brief bio of me. I'm a professor in cybersecurity and cybercriminology, and I am I've had in the past up to about 13, 14 PhD students out of the door, and currently I've got 3 PhD students working on various aspects, in particular AI, and I've got one DBS student who's actually joining us here, who's very much looking at the concept of the self-sovereign identity and blockchain on a very interesting project. So I've been working with a lot of organizations and governments, and you know, we've been doing a lot of activities on the front of cybersecurity. Today, what I want to do is, I know that the audience is a mix, but what I'm going to concentrate in really stay away from the science very much and stick with really the social background and social science background of it, and really concentrate on ethical considerations, the protection, and really the information flooding that is taking place right now, and in particular how this, you know, self-sovereign identity and blockchain can come in to help us. So what I want to do is really start looking at the concept of what is the problem statement here. And we've had all the indicators in the past during the pandemic that implementation of digital transformation is an important element as part of the moving forward with time evolution. But before pandemic, but during pandemic, right in front of our eyes, and I can easily say many of us, we saw that really we fast forwarded the element of technology into action. I mean, I remember the time in March 2020 where we started really having robots, drones delivering PPEs to hospitals, to people. Then Amazon got into action with the governments and many others that started using the abilities in order to support and push. And then all of a sudden we start seeing that universities come back in the forefront of government agenda. And really the amount of statistical analysis that came out, the amount of testing that came out of these universities really is amazing. So although before pandemic, we all looked at the traditional business models and we said, listen, we need to move on. But during pandemic, that transformation really happened across a lot of industries. And today, we can see that many of us now working in a hybrid manner. So if we cast our mind back to 2020, which is, it's a couple of years back, but in technology is a lifetime back, is remembered as a year of pandemic and the impact that it had in lives. It's been enormous. And the backbone to all of this while we were working in a constant lockdown was really technology. AI, blockchain, machine learning, IoT, although it was in the forefront of research, but it was tested during pandemic and applied at a very rapid motion. And to a point that I think we are, as a society, we are very soon going to be turned into a cyborg and a robot. I mean, already on Friday, I downloaded the latest version of the Microsoft 365. And guess what? They now have AI embedded into email system where we press a few buttons, you can actually reply. You don't even need to write anymore. It was pleasant, after the upload, the first email I got, it was a book chapter. It was a book that proposal that we had and finalized, and the publisher actually finalized the cover page and said, can you please have a look at this cover page, and if you're happy, let us know. And guess what? Right on top of the email, I had 4 boxes. I am happy with these graphics. I am not happy. I will email you later. And I'm saying, hang on a second. This is really very freaky now. This is really becoming an interesting concept. We are at the end of the day in the age of Industry 4, multi-billion-dollar market in there, powerful platforms. And what I would like to do right at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you one tiny example of how this multi-billion-dollar market is actually right now is in action in various continents, including US and Southeast Asia. Platforms using AI, data sets, cloud computing, machine learning, SMS messaging, customized, to a specific support services through deployment of AI-based, answering question in a real dynamic support automation. These are all part and parcel of today's activity. These because we are trying to personalize interaction across all channels. All of this came around, about the industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, called it Industry 4. And we all saw it in the fact that Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, more interaction inside of physical systems really became scalable and it became part of our lives. Gartner predicted that 20 billion devices connected to IT by 2020, and there is another prediction of 25.2 billion is going to be connected by 2025. These are real scenarios. And if you just look at yourself individually, I remember I was sitting in a presentation a few years ago when I had Microsoft as one of my guest speakers in the annual international conference. The guest speaker actually, the keynote speaker actually asked the audience, do you know how many devices you have connected? And at that time, some people said 4 or 5. And then he said, let me be, very blunt with you. Average is about 20, 30. And that was a few years ago. And then he says, start thinking about, people like, I don't know, your Xbox, look at your fridge, look at your cooker, look at your, I don't know, your car, look at your electric car, you look at your electric charger on the wall, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Your devices. So it's really, the numbers are increasing dramatically. Some of us may have, medical health issues. I may have a pacemaker, so IoT devices in my body. Some of us have IoT devices like Fitbits. The list goes on. Okay. And some of these things is really about the storage and cloud computing, and these are becoming very powerful in a point that the multiple algorithmic complex data analysis that is there, it provides us with the support. I mean, you look at the stock exchange. I was watching a program on TV the other day. I think it was CBS News or somewhere, that they said that Southeast Asia, young generations are actually now addicted to what we call fast stock exchange and buying and selling shares. And they said that the analysts and researchers are now looking at this as a way of addiction, and they think that this is really almost similar to gambling. And so this is all because the behavior and the way that we go on. And this is all part and parcel of Industry 4. This is all about the speed, the bandwidths, the facilities, the 5Gs. And now we're looking at 6Gs in location. So profiling becomes very important. So adding to all of that is the concept of machine learning, interaction, and how devices start self-learning. It reminds me of my learned colleague, Kevin Warwick, in his presentation. Many of you may know that Kevin Warwick is a cyborg in early 2000. Well, his history started back in 1990s, late 90s, but in 2002, he became a cyborg by implanting himself with a chip in his body. And then, he could actually, throughout the internet, he could actually, from New York, he could move a robot in London with his movement of his fingers. And then he's got a section in fact, you can watch the video on the YouTube. Anyway, there's a section that he's got the rat's brain evolved on a machine. And he says, it's very interesting. This robot goes around, hits once or twice on the side, but next time around learns from that, so he won't do it. Then it turns right, then it learns that there's another war on the right hand side, it won't do it. And eventually it becomes a very smart robot. And that's what we are. That's what all these data collections that industries is doing, is making the systems very intelligent. And there are problems with this actually. And I try to highlight some of those in a nutshell very quickly. Concept such as self-sovereign identity. I'm not sure how many of you guys are actually familiar with SSI, but self-sovereign identity really originates from the early 2000s of where in Britain we tried to do the ID cards, biometrics, and some of us may remember that that was a problem. A few million pounds spent, but at that time, data protection, in freedom for information and human rights didn't allow the governments and institutions to actually move forward with the biometrics and so on. And it was a complex scenario anyway. The idea was parked, but then the idea of this self-sovereign identity was always there until we had the what we call the Brexit came in 2016. And as part of the Brexit was the border between Ireland and what was happening was that there was a requirement for a soft border, and all of a sudden the concept of self-sovereign identity came into the equation. Can we do something like that? And I will, I've got a couple of slides that we will talk about that. And before that, we had blockchain came in as a cryptocurrency, but then blockchain has actually an enormous amount of wealth of really doing many things with it. So combination of the self-sovereign identity and blockchain is now become one of the interesting concepts. And this gives the digital identity a very interesting profile. Now, I always say to my students, we have students coming from all over the world, South America, India, Asia, Southeast Asia, Australasia. We have it all. And, I say to them that, you just arrived from, let's say, South America to the airport, and you have read so much about the UK that it's a very, very smart society. So, but then you're in the airport and you say, how can I be part of this smart society? And that's why decentralized identity, DID, and SSI can actually start working. So organizations, countries, governments can come together and start looking at how these things can merge. So some of you may have seen this graph. I don't want to scare people off, by the way. I mean, this is, it's not a very interesting graph as such, but it's interesting for me as a researcher. This was taken back in, as you can see, 10th of March 2020 at 3:40, and it was taken from a Sky News documentary. And as you can see that right in the middle of 2020 or 21, you can see the height of the pandemic. And you can see that the peak goes down around 2022, 23. It goes up again by 25, 26. And eventually at around 2032, we arrive at a point that where we are in a plateau, not far away from the height of the pandemic in 2021. That's very interesting. At the same time, for me as a researcher, for me who advocate technology and preach technology to a lot of industries, I think it's important to highlight that technology is here to support us and help us to move forward. And that's the reason I put that, to really match up with the first slide that I said, before pandemic and during pandemic. So this really the element that many of countries and many governments are really looking at a hybrid working environment. And I think we are going to get used to that. Challenges observed are quite interesting, and in a way that you have really a number of attack profiles that coming in, and we need to look at the challenges to prevent these cyber attacks. Things like network and applications, things like account anomalies, malwares, system anomalies, policy violation, social engineering, DDoS attack. These are some of the profiles that we have in kind of percentage. And of course, we saw at the height of pandemic around 2020, around April, May, June 2020, until about September 2020, we saw a lot of network attacks, a lot of academic institutions around the globe, including Northumbria University, were attacked, and Newcastle University was under ransomware attack, and why? Simply because there was an enormous amount of work that the universities have been doing during pandemic with governments, and everybody wanted to see what's going on. Everybody wanted a piece of that. So it's really important that we appreciate that, we understand that. So network attack, network reconnaissance on the servers has been really quite high, and FBI reported, like I think April 2020, that it was the highest at this point. So cyber risk, being systematic threat for the finance industry, has also been very high, and we now have a very robust and quality driven online banking system that it works, and I think we can trust it up to a point. But at the same time, a tiny problem in the system can cause a lot of issues. But in any case, these are the sort of things that we're looking at. By the way, another example of I'll give you another example of SSI very soon, where the banking is trying to look at in 2025. Crime and exposure to that, it really looks at how do we collect, anticipate, understanding intelligent goals, understanding business context, collecting the right assets of data. It goes back to I always ask this question from my master's students: can you differentiate between data, information, and knowledge? And we at one point, I think information is very important, but data is a lot more important than anything else, because you can analyze the data, and with really powerful algorithms that exist, and something in Cardiff University that they're working with the police actually, and under the hidden data and under the algorithms that they've created, they can actually take the lessons from the past of criminals, analyze it today, and forecast what's going to happen in future. And these are really very important elements that we have. Then we have search, millions of sources of crowd, and we look at defense search tools. We look at a lot of platforms in terms of detect. We look at sources of crowd. Again, cyber defense is there to look at, and so on. So we analyze, we look at algorithms, and then we start responding. Very similar to what digital forensic does actually. We collect the evidence required to resolve that incident, formalize it, and take action where possible within the domain. And interesting enough, one of the interesting part of the response would also be in terms of how the IoT devices, how do we respond to the IoT devices? If you look at the multifaceted data exposure, you have users, you have devices, you have locations, you have environment, you have data, and you have applications. Now, interesting that I would like to say, let's just take an example. I said, the banking sector, finance sector is actually started looking at the concept of self-sovereign identity and blockchain. And I was reading a story from one of the financial institutions that said that 2025 is going to be a landmark for us, because by then, hopefully, the 5G is actually settled in. And it really, the guys attempting to have it up and ready. And they say, for example, you walk into your immediate car or mobiles or smartphone, and it says that if you are in this car dealership in order to purchase a car, we are pleased to say to you that we are happy straight away without any. Now, then you say to yourself, how does a faceted data exposure becomes very important? Users, devices, location, data, environment, applications. There. And imagine if I just arrived from Argentina. Structure.
Hamid, sorry, I think Hamid, your voice is breaking quite a bit. Hamid, can you hear me?
Once we've got this multifaceted environment ready, what we need to do is look at the concept of smart cities as a whole. If you look at the concept of a smart city as a whole, you'll notice that it would be based on network, sensors, actuators, and so on. Okay. Now, by the way, I'm not sure how many of you guys are driving electric cars. Well, I've just started driving an electric car 2 months. And when I went to insure my car, I didn't realize that the insurance group is 48 in UK, and that's the top. And my insurance group was 46. So I said to the guy, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, you don't believe me if I tell you, in this car we have over 500,000 switches and sensors. If any of them goes, none of the side of street mechanics can actually fix it. So please cast your mind, what is a smart city? I want you to really feel the position. Smart city is not just about changing traffic light, just because 5 cars are sitting in a traffic. No, smart cities of today is based on very heavy driven algorithms. So data needs to be collected in order to get this right. Then all of a sudden, invasion of privacy becomes quite an important aspect. And all of a sudden, security risk is at its highest. I mean, think of it this way. We have unfortunate conflict between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. In the past 10 days, you have seen internet has slowed down. That's very simple. Number one is because some of these organizations where the server is bouncing around the globe, they're caught up in the conflict and caught up in the embargo. That's number one. Number two is everybody's trying to listen to everybody else, i.e. hacking everybody else. So you can see that a slight movement in that, how catastrophic it is. And imagine if you have an autonomous vehicle, which all of a sudden is caught in one of these servers that stop transmitting. God help us. So has to be a striking balance between providing services and protecting privacy. And again, one of those is actually self-sovereign identity. Single sign-on is is a favor, but it doesn't work. It cannot work. So it has to be really a multi-dimensional. Biometrics doesn't work as a whole. It's very interesting. One of my colleagues had one of these laptops with a fingerprint on it. The night before they went to the pub, he had a few pints and he was really drunk in the morning. He tried to switch on his computer. He couldn't because alcohol in the bloodstream couldn't actually recognize the fingerprint. There you go. So fingerprint is not really always one of the best facility to have. So we need to look at the strong analytics of data and safeguarding the whole concept of single sign-in, and try to really start looking at how data sensor and authentication certification can work. And for that, we need a privacy enhanced technology, PET, to really look at individual data and then start looking at how we can come into some agreement. Interoperability is also one of the issues and is one of the challenges, especially with IoT devices. We need to standardize all of these elements. So if you look at evolution of identity, early on, we had username and password. We still have that. As part of that, we have either federated or decentralized. If you look at the federated, it consists of SAML, which is security assertion markup line, for login standards. And then you have OpenID Connect. That is connected to user-centric, standard practice. And then you have decentralized, which is really, sometimes you have, the whole concept is centralized in a different manner and so on. But that's an evolution of identity that we are talking about. If you look at decentralized identity, you find out that the role of the identity provider can be decomposed into issuer, holder, and enabler, the end user. Now, this is very, very important because, we are now getting into the concept of verifier and so on. So we will be talking about it a little bit more. And so in this sense, you have the issuer and you have the verifier. Now, I could ask you guys, give me a verifier, and some of you may tell me Amazon. Yeah, Amazon is a good verifier. Your account in Twitter could be a very good verifier. And these are the decentralized identities that are now being put together. So we move into the concept of self-sovereign identity. The self-sovereign identity is really hinges on what we call decentralized identifier DIDs. It's a digital identity. You walk around with your digital identity all the time. So you walk into a bank, you walk into a shop, you actually don't need to show your card. You can, you could probably just Apple Pay or whatever, and that payment is gone through. Okay. You walk into, I don't know how many of you guys have done it. At least in London, we have 5 or 6 branches of Amazon Fresh supermarket. You don't need anything. You just walk into the Amazon Fresh. You've got your smartphone. You tap it in because it recognizes from an Amazon point that you are a member. The gate opens up. You go in. You take a plastic bag. You fill it up with the item. Every item that is picked up from the shelf is monitored, is priced. The minute it goes into a bag, the money is taken off your account. Now, there is an issue here that many people don't realize. Please also look at the difference between tangible and intangible. Okay, I'll come to it in a second. So the intangible is the data that we're talking about in a digital environment. So if you decided that, you've already got Cucumber at home, you don't want another Cucumber, so you put it back in, what happens is the money is put back into your account. Now, this is intangible working with intangible. Now, what happens if you put the Cucumber back in, which is a tangible, and you actually don't get a refund in the intangible? Who is going to actually be the judge and the jury? Because in every conflict, you need a third person. And that third person is really where you start looking at the concept of SSI. And that's why the decentralized identifier comes into very, very effectively. Because somebody has to verify the public key that you have. Credential may contain data from issuer database, social media accounts, many, ports, history of transaction, e-commerce site, testimonies, friends, colleagues, your workplace, is a good example. Your bank details is even better. So the concept of self-sovereign identity looks at the entity, which is you. From you, it needs to look at your identity. What is your identity? Who are you? I'm Hamid Jahankhani. No, you're not. You're called Gordon Bowen. No, I'm called Hamid. No, you're called Gordon. Just because, your face is like Hamid, it doesn't mean that you're Hamid. And all of a sudden, the dispute starts coming out because I need attributes in order to identify me as who I am. And those attributes are the flags or the signposts that would actually start putting the facts together. So these attributes becomes a really very important element of what self-sovereign identity is. And one of those is the verifiable claims, which is deed. The deed consists of an issuer, a holder, and a verifier. Who is an issuer? You know, I've got one example later on in an academic environment, which you'll have all of these clarified in front of you very simply. So who is the issuer? Who is the holder? Who is the wallet? Am I Gordon or am I Hamid? I don't know. Somebody has to verify that. Now that verified signature could be in many formats. I'll give you a good example. If you go to Amazon today, you know, if you're a good customer with Amazon, you try to purchase an item, you know, that's, in fact, I was exposed to it only recently because I didn't even know that Amazon does it. And, you know, my son wanted to buy an iPad. So he said, Dad, can I buy one? Yeah, okay, let's buy it. So I went in, and before I pay, it comes up and says, oh, by the way, you know, you're eligible to get free 5 payments, interest-free. I'm saying, hang on, how do you verify that? And then my son said, try that and see what happens. I said, no, come on, this needs to be verified. I went through the motion, I just pressed the tick, yes, okay. And then all of a sudden, you know, some of money was taken out of my account as part 1 payment. And they said the next 4 payments will be at so and so and so months, because I am verified with Amazon. These are clear examples as how we are really being verified without even us knowing it. Okay, and these are all because of the centralized identifier that exists. Then a public or private blockchain comes in. The concept of blockchain is really, if I in an absolute nutshell, which is very cruel, and I'm sorry to apologize to scientists and researchers in blockchain, is a glorified cryptographic algorithm. Okay, so if you look at that, it gives you that freedom to actually signpost and really almost use it as a signature base. So if you start looking at blockchain and SSI platform, then you start looking at the activity layers. You have the credential layers, you have the deed communication layers, and you have the distributed layers. All of these work in a very centralized and synchronous manner. I mean, in the distributed ledger, you can be an airport, you can be a bank, you can be a hospital. You know, I can walk around as a patient, walk into a hospital, and my smartphone highlight that you need to go to ward 5 on floor 1 and meet Mr. or Mrs. X or consultant A. Okay, that is where the distributed ledger becomes very, very active, and it's a one-to-many, by the way. And that's the beauty of the blockchain that allows you to do that. So how all of these things is about data privacy, it's about confidentiality, it's about CIA, integrity and authentication, authorization. So yes, SSI is fantastic. SSI is very expensive. SSI is something that a lot of large organizations have started implementing in their own organizations. But my argument is why? Why can't we implement SSI from a government point of view, where we link the SSI, self-sovereign identity, digital identity, into the e-government platform, and then from the e-government platform, you can actually bring in all of those elements. I had a student who did a bit of research a few years ago, and 2-3 years ago, looking at the amount of fraud in the government. Okay, not fraud. When I say fraud in the government, doesn't mean that people take money in their pockets. No, these are issues that interdepartmental offices have in every government. You know, governments are established from various departments, and And now that we have GDPR in place, how do we put all of these elements together? Because GDPR is very, very restrictive and is almost overarching, sits on top and attempt to look after. So the ethical consideration becomes quite an important factor in GDPR. And also don't forget that it's important in a format that we talk about how the concept of working in various departments can actually accelerate some of the decision making. But as I said, if there are problems, and I'm going back into the first slide where I say we are turning into a digital transformative society, and coined the phrase, it's not new, but digital leaderships is now becoming very interesting, and all of this does require the deed and the wallet, user wallet, in order to be able to carry out all of those elements. One of the benefits that digital leadership and digital transformation has, and we recommended that, was actually in project management, and because then hopefully projects won't fail before even starts. So this is quite an interesting. As part of all of this, what we have is called passwordless authentication. As many of you probably know, Microsoft has already indicated that most of their application that they have is now passwordless authentication that looks at many of these elements in place, and you have the public key available, so on a local devices, and then you go on. I mean, passwordless authentication, a simple one. 10 days ago, I had to put on the wall outside the charger for my electric car. Fine. It wasn't working because it was supposed to deliver 7 kilowatts of energy to charge the car fast, but it was only doing 2.2. So I called the company. I said, what's going on? Oh, they said, not a problem. I said, can you hold your phone near the pod? It's actually the company is called Pod as well. Anyway, the pod. I said, yes. I said, okay, now we have a link between you and the pod. I said, yeah, I can see that. Has the color on the pod has changed? I said, yes, it's gone to red. I said, he said, that's no problem, that's fine. Let me reset it from my end. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, they started troubleshooting and started resetting everything from their element. And this is all passwordless authentication that we're talking about in reality. But then I had a long chat and I said, can I talk to your manager? I said, why? We sorted your problem. I said, no, you just created me a problem. I said, what is it? I said, you have no right to access my device. Who gave you that right? Well, you signed the document. I said, I never signed any document. And why would I be signing a document to allow you to take over my control? How do I know that tomorrow you're not going to be hacked and then all my data are stolen? And at that point, I've opened up a can of worms. So it is really very important that you realize, and we preach and we educate and train the society understanding, so that we are not head-on collision with technology. By the way, I call the fast-moving technology a runaway train of technology, and very soon it is going to clash. Because if we don't control it, if we don't standardize it, if we don't have enough legislative framework to govern these elements, we could easily be under an influence. I've had my car for 2 months, and for the past 3 weeks, the car is telling me that, do you want me to show you how to drive? And I'm saying, hang on a second, I didn't ask you that. Why? Because the car, based on the algorithm in the past 2 months, realized what I do, when I accelerate, when I decelerate, when I start, when I stop, how far I go, where do I go. All those information are stored, and now it's learning from me. It's the AI don't forget of the rat's brain, as Kevin Warwick explained. Few hits, it learned that, hang on a second, Hamid is driving this way. So Hamid can actually now be given some instruction as well. So this is where the password-led authentication comes into the equation. What I want to do, just to close off very quickly, I want to give you one example. This is a $50 billion project is running in the US. Singapore has tried it. Turkey have tried it. UK, we are trying it. But the concept of university is almost historical now. Why? It's very simple. You have, if you think about the MOOCs, the massively open online courses that we've had, there are plenty of them around. Coursera, edX, use data from tens of, millions of people using machine learning and so on. And online learning is becoming very interesting. However, this multi-billion-dollar industry now is saying that, why only to these organizations? Why to Coursera? Why can't we use it in Oxford, Cambridge, University of London, Swansea University? Georgia Tech, for example, pioneered an online master's in computer science program, and they exceeded 10,000 enrollment overnight, right? And this is because there are ideas now going around. First of all, why do we need to have the same program? Why can't we just be a business to business and work, all universities work together and share the employees? That's one of the ideas that comes in this $50 billion project. So you have a single distributed platform, and this single distributed platform will work with a handful of universities and say, you drive, you deliver the forensics, you deliver the cybersecurity, you deliver X, Y, Z. And by the way, these are all based on the industry requirements. And then you can actually automatically, students go and start having a job. Very similar to Netflix idea, okay? You can also have students to earn transferable, credits as well. How does it work? If you look at the concept of machine learning and AI, SMS messaging, so you can have all these messages that comes into your mobile devices, to your mobile platform. You actually look at how you blend the use cases, empower students to service personnel and data, because that's very important. You can also even identify the pattern of the students' requirements, when they want to study, when they don't want. And these are all part of the digital transformation. Many campuses are incorporating kind of self-service innovation, And if you have a predictive analytics at the back of it, then you can actually have a lot of data coming out to see who is doing what, when are they studying, and so on. So if you look at the advancement of AI in education, AI ED, you'll find out that chatbots becoming extremely important in our everyday activities. To be honest with you, there are now courses in the US that the minute assignments are submitted by students, let's say the assignment submission is today by 5 o'clock. The minute the assignment is closed, the assignments are marked, the marks are entered, and the students know exactly what to do. How? It's very simple. You could actually rather sit down and make individual comments. You could create that beforehand so that AI can actually look at algorithm, look at the assignment, and then it says, hang on a second, the lecturer expected that you explain on this is missing. Therefore, you've reduced 1 mark here, 5 marks there, 3 marks there. actually that expert system becoming very, very interesting. So you have chatbots, expert systems, you have intelligent tutors, agent, you have machine learning, you have personalized learning systems, and then all of a sudden you have visualization and virtual learning. All of these things come together. But at the heart of it, which interests me, is the ethics and the privacy. Lack of AI expertise and lack of understanding how much information I'm actually giving away. The leakage, the digital leakage, don't forget tangible versus intangible, okay? And those are really where I look at it from a cybersecurity point of view. Finally, my final slide, and I'm sorry that it took a long time. Look at this standard. EBSI, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with it, but it's actually European-based, European blockchain standard infrastructure, and it's now widely used throughout Europe. You have your issuer, you have your verifier, and I'm the user. Everyone is a user, right? As a student. The University of Gand is actually the issuer, and Miguel in University of Rovira is actually the verifier. The user ever, through various verifiable credential, through the blockchain deed, can actually signpost and really get to their course that she wants. She can see her mark, she can have all of the IDs and everything that is required. And this is really, this $50 billion project is moving on. The back of this is a concept of SSI, self-sovereign identity. Unless you have a digital identity, and unless you have a third party to protect your self-sovereign identity, if it gets to the court of law, as a judge and a jury, of course, that would be difficult. And that's why you have all of these verifiable and verifier in hand in order to be able to look after your digital identity. Okay. On that note, I'm going to close off and say any questions, guys.
Thank you very, very much, Hamid. That was very interesting and very informative. So, any questions for Hamid? Any observation or any